Hi, Misha here, and this is another Blackbox. It's been a little while since I've done one, and I wanted to do it on a topic that will probably feature on the main channel eventually, but it's one of those ever-changing topics that's about as easy to pin down, to nail down as Jell-O. And yes, you will hear the chair moving because it's cold outside and raining, and I don't want to go out there. And I tend to think best in motion, which maybe I'll explain. There is actually a reason for all of it, but that's another video topic. This time I want to talk about a question that gets brought up frequently. The AK market as of early 2021. Specifically, I'm recording this at the beginning of February. A couple of points of fact as of right now. Laws have not changed. Importation regulations have not changed. So the same firearms that were allowed in a year ago, 2 years ago, are still allowed in now. So why is the AK market so devoid, and why are prices so high? Well, one of the most obvious answers really is COVID, Corona. People started buying guns for various reasons back in March of 2020. Looking at our records, there might have been some buying in February that was related to COVID, but really it got kicking hard in March and running very heavily through May into early June. But it continued throughout 2020. And then, of course, in 2021, it's been pretty high because of political factors. Plus, COVID is still a factor. So how is this really a problem? Okay, people are buying a lot, but why can't the manufacturers, the distributors, keep up? The truth is, they're trying, but they have a lot to overcome. Obviously, some manufacturers are in areas where they've had to shut down due to the virus. So obviously when you have a shutdown, you're that many days behind schedule. No bueno. On top of that, and probably even more important, parts. Very, very, very few companies make all of their parts now. A lot of companies might make receivers, barrels, what have you, but are they going to make the handguard, the pistol grip, or even the magazine? No, most of these are outsourced to subcontractors, which generally works well. Metgar is a good example. They've made a name for themselves by making the best magazines, period. And this has meant that we've had a generation of all these different handguns with just great magazines because a company specialized at a mag, and you know, Smith & Wesson, Ruger, Walther, Beretta, whoever goes to Metgar, asks them to make a mag, they're going to make it right to their specs, but they're going to make it a good mag. The same thing could be said for furniture pieces. A company like, say, Magpul specializes in furniture. Yeah, they do other stuff now, but you know, they make good furniture, all things considered. So on and so forth. So what companies are running into, even if they have the workers there, and they have most of the parts for the guns, they are lacking a few parts. And sometimes they're not even critical parts. For example, I know that last year a certain company had to delay shipping for a long time because they were putting out an AR-15 type gun and they didn't have port doors. So this happens, and that's caused the market. Now the AK specifically, imports have been slow because overseas they've really shut down factories, and they haven't been in a huge hurry to put them back up because a lot of those are government subsidized or their workers are receiving a check to stay at home. This is why places like FB Radom, Arsenal AD, Bulgaria have really been intermittent. But even when they come in, prices are higher because of the exchange rate in a lot of areas that hasn't been as favorable for the dollar recently as in the past. Now, coming to the U.S., you have companies like Palmetto State, PSA, and Kalashnikov, USA, KUSA. The same thing happens there. They do subcontract some parts out, and they have had to shut down a time or two. This plus the demand, you can understand why the supply has been short. And this demand has gone on much longer than most previous buying sprees, where we're coming up on a year now. So it's become cumulative. On top of that, the supply is just by the nature of things becoming more limited. Fewer and fewer foreign companies make AKs today. It's an old design. And the biggest maker in the world, Russia, their guns are sanctioned. First, Kalashnikov concerned guns, Izhmash, in 2014, and then Molot guns in 2017. China is also sanctioned. That dates back to 1994. So, yeah, China and Russia are out. That leaves us with Romania. They have their own issues. They've also had some safety issues at the factory in recent years, including a couple of major explosions. Also, Romania is partially owned and controlled by the government, so civilian guns take a back seat. FB Ratum is much in the same position. And Bulgaria, well, it's a relatively big factory, but they have plenty of military contracts themselves because, again, they're one of the few AK makers left. So let's say an African or a Middle Eastern nation wants an AK, their options are narrowing by the day. Plus Bulgaria, along with Happy Ratum, of course. But Bulgaria has a huge line of guns in 5.56, which is popular for countries wanting to work with NATO and have access to the ammo. And they do 7.62 by 39, which is still very popular in a lot of other places around the world. Places like Germany, Hungary, Finland, they don't make AKs anymore. And Czechoslovakia is gone. They never made an AK. They made the VZ-58, but the main factory over there stopped making those in the 1980s. You have Czech Small Arms, CSA, formerly D-Technic, that makes them, but they are a small company. They can only make a handful, and they're imported and converted here by another small company, Checkpoint USA. So, pretty narrow, limited production run there. As far as like the IWI Aces, that's more of economics. They brought over too many too fast, but the fact is they didn't sell so well. And IWI they have their own issues. Well, yeah. And over here, I don't know what Century Arms is doing. I've kind of remarked that for a long time now. They don't seem to be importing a lot from Romania, all besides, and they've kind of flailed around ever since the RAS-47 and the Visca. I think trying to determine what to do and whatnot. I don't know what they're doing. Arsenal in Las Vegas seems to be hanging on. They have brought over a few imports. They did the SAM-5. They just did a SAM-7K pistol again that came in. They've done some carbines, the SLR-107UR. They brought some over. So they have been bringing over stuff, but it's a pretty limited portion. I don't know. I think it's just what they can do in the production capacity. FB Ratum, that was going to be imported by Arms of America. There was a change in ownership of the company last year. I could say more, but I don't want to because confidence, as you know. And that plus the COVID situation, I don't know where the mini Barreel's at. I really don't know. Kalashnikov USA has always been slow. They did finally get out the KR-103 last year. But they're a small company too. And everyone they can produce, it goes out the door. Palmetto State, PSA. This is what Jay and I kind of were worried about last year when we talked about SHOT Show. They took too many projects on. They promised all these variants. They promised all these models. It was too much. And now the official word is it's all pretty much suspended until they can get caught up. Keep in mind, they're not a huge factory either, and they have their AR line and their AK line. So it seems like they're sticking to basics. And they too are being limited by subcontract supplies, and when they get stuff in, they are building it and shipping it out as quick as possible. But there's only so much you can do. A lot of other smaller builders were using parts kits, and those have dried up. And again, that's just kind of history, because parts kits were always a limited supply thing, and we always knew when old 1960s, 70s parts kits were gone, they would be gone. That's kind of where we're at now. That plus the barrel ban, dates back to 2005, really puts a dent in the AK parts kit thing. The fact is that the supply of AKs has gone down because there's fewer. Well, I wouldn't say that. I think it's more demand has gone up. If you look back 15 years ago, we just had this, but the AKs weren't as popular then, and that's kind of the thing. Is they're a victim of their own success. People want AKs to be produced in the numbers, be available in the numbers like ARs. That's never going to happen because the AR is a homegrown design. It was created in America to best utilize American manufacturing techniques and strengths, and all the parts can be sourced here. AKs were created in Russia and the Comblock, and they were designed to suit not only the Comblock's production standards, but the ones they had dating back to the 1950s and 60s. And yeah, it was never tailored to the American market. And before it became so popular, it was always kind of an interesting but boutique item. And that kind of kept demand reasonable with supply. Plus, like for example, the Wasser 1063, Cougar was able to turn those out so rapidly because they were using a lot of pre-existing parts. Arsenal has always imported, always sold in small numbers, so not a lot has changed there. If anything, Arsenal has actually upped their production quite a bit for America, but there's only so much they can do. And that's kind of where we're at. I think people just need to maybe not worry about the AK for a bit, buy other guns, or even get into other hobbies for a while. Let the market calm down. Let manufacturers, let importers, let suppliers catch up. We're all exhausted. We kind of all need a break, truth be told. So the status of the AK market is, it needs to cool. Set it on the counter and let it cool for a little while. Because right now the demand is so much higher than the supply. And that leads to overpricing, and that dealers don't like that. I know people think, oh, they're making a fortune, you must love this. Economically maybe, but it's emotionally draining, and after a year of it nearly, we're all just plumb tired. We're just exhausted. And we don't like seeing people overpay for guns. At least a lot of dealers don't. It's one thing to make a profit, but it's another thing to just triple your money. Doing it once in a while, that can be like, hey, that was the good deal of the week. But when it's more frequent, it ceases to be a good thing. On the flip side, right now, if say someone sold a Wasser for $700 or an Arsenal for $1,000, you know what would happen. The individual who bought that would turn right around, go home, and put it on Gunbroker. One way or the other, the market kind of finds its level. You know what I mean? So my best advice to everyone, myself included, I haven't really picked up any AKs lately, just do other stuff. Go get into other guns, maybe old bolt actions. That's what I suggest. Or do whatever else you might have interest in. Let this settle. Let the market catch up, and then hopefully let the market introduce some new things, because by God, there hasn't been much really new to get excited about in a year. A couple of small models here and there, but nothing truly new. Just let it ride. Check back in the summer, and that'll give prices time to settle down. And what I'd like to see, there was a big panic after the 2008 presidential election, and it lasted through the spring of 2009. But the nice thing was, after all those crazy prices and panic buying, the fall of 2009 was good. Arsenals, especially like the SGLs, the Segas, were at their lowest point ever. They were $4.99 retail. And so 2009, late year 2010, into 2011, that was a good buying period with some good prices. And then, of course, in 2013, we had another panic buy because of Sandy Hook. And that would last for quite a long time. But when it finally died down, by 2014, there were good deals again to be had. And that ran into 2015. One of the best deals I can remember from 2015 was the Vepr FM for $9.99 retail, $1,000, or $1,200 for the folding stock flavor. And then, of course, in 2016, a lot of people thought they would get smart, remembering 2008, figuring Hillary was going to get elected. So there was an early pre-panic, pre-November buy. But then when the election went the other direction, the market was a buyer's market again in late 2016, early 2017. And so you see this pattern, up and down, over and over. So that's what I'd like to see. It's time for this one to dip down again, because the coffers, the supply is just not out there, guys. Even if manufacturers are producing, there's so many back orders that, what do you do? So anyway, let me know what you think. This is kind of an informal video, putting my thoughts out there. Please feel free to comment and share yours, and that will help us kind of make more of a formal research video for the main channel in a few weeks. But yeah, let me know what you think. And if you could, as always, like, share, subscribe. And if you want to look at AK stuff, we still have plenty of old videos over at Mishaco. But yeah, I appreciate you hanging out for a few minutes here. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.